First of all, I would like to greet all the viewers at home. Good morning, everyone. You are great from the Indonesia. Okay, our teacher for my research is developing English-speaking material based on critical thinking skill at Vocational School in Makassar. And then me, Imran Tristaurin. I am a lecturer in Indonesia, Politeknik Informatika Nasional, Makassar, South Sulawesi, Indonesia. Okay, without further ado, let me come to my briefly introduction for you about my under the title of developing English speaking material based on critical thinking skill in a for vacation school in Makassar. And then my first slide for this morning is about the introductions. On the introductions, let me briefly sum like another term or another an article of this kind of a title about the critical thinking. And then I'm starting by emphasizing that in the process of teaching and learning, the availability of textbook is one of the essential components that must exist because the textbook serve as a guide for students and their teachers of any level of education to be actively engaged in classroom practice. In this line of Iqbal 2013, who argues that existence of the textbook could facilitate students to maximally achieve the targeted learning objective. Added to this, textbooks serve as the core of the educational practice, confer students with a rich array of new and potentially interesting facts, and open the door to a world of ethics of experience. Chambers and Kelfi, 1998, page 7. This suggests that textbooks play an important in the success of teaching and learning practice. In relation to the statement Kitao and Kitao 1997 articulate that textbooks are of great importance in the process of teaching and learning as they serve as the center of instruction and describe what goes in the classroom practice in order that teaching and learning activities become efficient, effective, and meaningful. And another briefly introductions to be going to be raised in this research is the second statement. The development of speaking is one of the productive language skill, somehow as a perform in the English text which focuses on the memorization of the dialogue with the application of other lingual method which mostly articulate the use of a drilling technique. This also happened in the development of writing skill, which are oriented to the product approach, putting an emphasis on rearranging sentences. This evidence directly or indirectly determine the value of the acquisitions of the Telugu language on English on the grounds that students are only driven to deal with systematic knowledge which is oriented to understanding to other layer of the language system as stated by Hedge 2008. So what I'm going to deliver in this kind of introduction, the first slide or the first paragraph was telling you about the condition or the existence of the textbook, especially in a vocational school in Indonesia, especially in Makassar. And the second one, I briefly describe here about how's the system of giving the task for the student, or indirectly they just open the book and reading it, etc. Based on introductions previously, I'm going to have to tell you this about the introductions, about the conditions, how's the existence of the textbook, and then how the teacher giving some sort of a task for the students. So based on the kind of the introductions, I briefly to raise some sort like a research question in my research. How the critical thinking improving the student speaking skill. One of the purpose of this research is try to invite the critical thinking of the student, try to create their own task based on their own thinking. Okay, let me move to another slide. In this line, I'm going to describe you an overview of related research studies. A number of research studies have been done on critical thinking and language proficiency. In their paper title, The Relationship Between Critical Thinking and Language Proficiency of Malaysian undergraduates all, Rosiati and Rosner 2008, reveal the result of their observation as proficiency in English positively related to critical thinking ability, implying that if the undergraduate are proficient in English, their critical thinking ability will also be heightened. Nikopor, Amini, Farsani, and Nasiri 2012 published their study of critical thinking and language learning strategy in 2012. They found a significant relationship between Iranian use of language learning strategy and their way of thinking. This positive relation may be a replication of many previous studies concerning the effectiveness of critical thinking on the ultimate success of language learner and the challenging process of French language learning all. In study on relationship between collaborative learning and critical or Iranian able learner, NANI 2005 tested 144 adult English language learners. She divided the participant into two groups, the control group and the experimental group. The finding revealed that the experimental group outperformed the control group. Alazoglu 2007 analyzed Turkish students of critical thinking, individual voice and writing. In her study, titled Critical Making and a Voice in Equal Writing, in which she concluded that students tend to memorize and write what they read rather than filter it through their judgment and reasoning. She declared that the student first in the dedicated approach, concept-based instruction in the classic educational system, where learning is centered on the retention of previous learning information and where no thinking is required. The study suggests taking remedies integrated critical thinking into the classroom and the curricula. Another perspective comes from course of 2012. It is concluded that some studies show understanding results by teaching learners skills to improve their critical thinking. However, somehow the success does not include all learners. This could stem from the method used by researchers to teach critical thinking. Marin and Harper in 2010 studied two groups of American high school students and concluded that the students receiving explicit instruction saw much larger gain than those who had received embedded instruction in critical thinking. Cosgrove 2012 conducted a study in Oxford University and concluded that there was need for an explicit and systematic approach to teaching critical thinking, as the student internalize the explicit and required aspect of critical thinking and largely miss those were implicit. Therefore, research showed that explicit method of instruction in critical thinking have been more effective. Okay, now I come to last of my presentations this morning. And now I come to the findings and discussions. The first is the frequency and percentage of the student speaking achievement. In this section, the researcher present frequency and percentage of the student score in a speaking test by the pre-test and post-test. Before conducting the treatment, the researchers give a pre-test to know the prior knowledge of students in speaking. After giving the treatment, the student get post-test. Then the result of pre-test and post-test are compared to measure the student achievement in speaking. And the second one, here, critical thinking applies the treatment, and this was done by the student of several meetings in their English speaking class. The student applied critical thinking and simulated the rule in the rule situation based on the topic they presented in each meeting as follows: handling the requesting the travel information via phone, handling airline ticket reservation, promoting package of tour, and guiding to the tourism spot. As being stated, at the previous chapter, the frequency of the percentage of the student score are firstly tabulated and classified into five levels of classification, namely very poor, poor, fair, fairly good, good, very good, and excellent. The frequency and the percentage of the student score and a pre-test and a post-test were calculated based on the score result of both rated and the following table. And then the table show that in the pre-test before giving treatment applying critical thinking in the student speaking skills, that there was 12 students or 50% of the 50% out of the 24 whose grades are in a very poor classification, 10 students or 41.67 percentage whose graded whose grades are in a poor classification. Only 2 students or 8.33% whose grades are in a fair classification as the highest score that could be reached by the student in the pretest. So there were none of students whose grades are in a very good, good, very good, and excellent classification. On the other hand, in the person after giving treatment by applying critical thinking in the student speaking class, the students saw the development. Table above show the development of student score in which 3 students of 12.50% out of 24 whose grade are a very good classification. 2 students or 8.33% whose grade are in a poor classification. 6 students or 20% whose graded are in a fair classification. And then 6 students or 25% whose grade are in a fairly good classification. 4 students or 16.67% whose graded in a good classification. And 3 students or 12.50% whose grade are very good classification. as the highest level order could be reached by the students in post-test. It means that the application of critical thinking in the LT classroom, particularly in the student speaking class, could improve the student speaking skill. Okay, let me come to my last report presentations about this research. Finding and discussion still continue. The mean score and standard deviation of student pretest and post-test. The application of critical thinking is one of teaching technique of English speaking skill could build up the student achievement in speaking which cover accuracy, fluency, and comprehensibility. The student speaking in terms of accuracy was born the students have flexible pronunciation, correct grammar, and appropriate word choices. The student speaking in terms of fluency, dealing with the ability of students to use language spontaneously and confidently without undue process of hesitation and no time spent for searching the words. Then, the student speaking in terms of comprehensibility, dealing with easy for the listener to understand the speaker's intention. Based on the data analysis, it has found that there was significant difference between the mean score and the student pretest and the post-test of speaking as shown in the following table. Several sections above show that the mean score of the student in post-test 3.92 was higher than pre-test 2.22 or increased 1.722 point. These conditions show that there were improvement of student achievement in speaking which cover accuracy, fluency, comprehensibility toward the application of a critical thinking in NLT, particularly in student speaking class. Furthermore, Table 16 also saw the significant value was this condition indicated the significant value of the student speaking achievement point are smaller than the level of significant 1.5. Therefore, the differences are not significant. So the result of the student achievement in speaking test indicated there was the significant improvement of the student achievement in speaking skill toward the application of critical thinking in English speaking class at the 11th student of tourism department in SMK for Makassar. Okay, that was kind of my presentation this morning. Thank you so much for your attention. See you next time for my next presentation. Thank you.